Let's go straight to the Metro then. We're going to start with the Declan Rice story. Chaps, Sam, I mean, this looks like it was going to happen to Arsenal. Manchester City just put their hat in the ring for a little bit, but he is going to be an Arsenal player. £105 million, the second most expensive English player after Jude Bellingham. A couple of very talented midfielders. Does it seem about right, this move, in terms of the fee and the right move for Rice?
Over the course of his development, as he's become such a big figure in the Premier League and for West Ham and also for England, he's actually been sort of destined for a few places, and not least Chelsea. Probably a year ago would have been the favourites. That was, of course, the club he was at for a while when he was an academy boy. And Arsenal have come into it relatively late. I mean, it was for the last 2 years, really. It feels like we've been writing Declan Rice transfer stories. And this is just a huge deal for Arsenal to break their transfer record like that, to spend, as you said, the second highest amount on a British player in history. It's also important because they've sued him, and whatever City's intentions were, we can only assume that they were trying to buy the player and came in late. They've seen them off, and it shows that they can be a destination club again. You know, they've always struggled, probably for the last 20 years since the arrival of Roman Abramovich, to really compete for the biggest fees. That probably changed when the Emirates was being financed. So it's a really big moment for Arsenal. A player right in the prime who's going to get better and better, possibly a young English player, an England international, and a really big signing.
Martin, let's have a look at your paper then, The Times, and Arsenal ready to seal £105 million deal for Rice. I mean, I guess you'd echo a lot of what Sam says there. And from a West Ham perspective, because we always think about where a player's going, but obviously where he's come from, it was a lovely way to sign off for him, wasn't it? Winning the Europa Conference League. He will go with their best wishes, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was a kind of farewell, a fond farewell, wasn't it, for that final? And it's a huge amount of money for West Ham, and the possibilities that they now have, about strengthening their squad, which they probably need to do because they didn't have the best season in the Premier League last season. So, if they can spend that money wisely, or a lot of it anyway, then they could really be challenging for the top half of the table properly next season, because you don't get that sort of windfall every day.
Yeah, and Martin, in terms of Arsenal, I mean, Sam said a destination club once again. I mean, you think that there wasn't that much between Manchester City and Arsenal. Obviously, we get on to Havertz, but the signing of Declan Rice suggests that gap may narrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too long ago then Arsenal's sort of best players were being bought up by Manchester City. It's now they are not just competing with them for the best players, but it looks like they're beating them. I mean, it'd be interesting to know just quite how hard Manchester City pushed, or is there even an element they were trying to push the price up so that Arsenal wouldn't get one of the best players in the Premier League on the cheap, and therefore they don't have as much money to spend on other players. I mean, we know they've signed Havertz as well, but perhaps this will restrict them so much, but a bit more by having to pay so much for Rice.
Yeah, if we move on to The Sun, it's his Gunners' £170 million double. I mean, Sam, obviously this is reference to the Kai Havertz going for £65 million. I mean, that question about them getting closer to Manchester City, but also, is this where the market's at now? The fact we're seeing, we saw it, didn't we, with Chelsea spending all that money in January. Is it 105 Declan Rice? There's some big money still flying around in the Premier League.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if you're buying top international players, especially when you're buying them both those players are younger, I think they're both 24, and you are buying them either with competition from other Premier League clubs, or in the case of Havertz, there may not have been that as much competition domestically, but clearly there was interest in Spain as well. I think that the price is going to go high, and these are footballers who are probably on that curve. Well, but certainly Arsenal would hope with both of them are on that curve where they're going to see them get better and better, and there's always a premium for that. Havertz is is a different kind of signing to Declan Rice, in that my colleague Sam Dean has compared it to Martin Odegaard, who there was a bit of scepticism when he came to Arsenal, and he hadn't really done it at Real Madrid. He'd been this kind of teen prodigy, just like Havertz was in the Bundesliga, and his career's been revived under Mikel Arteta, and that seems to be the plan. It's actually quite an interesting approach that Arsenal are taking here. They're seeing room for growth in players, whether that's Gabriel Jesus, in a sense with Zinchenko as well. That all kind of fits that sort of template of player that they're looking for. But if you're signing a player from Chelsea, a Germany international, clearly it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah, Sam, just wondering where he fits in, though, Havertz, and the fact that he might have missed a few opportunities in front of goal, maybe lowered his price a little bit when you compare him to Rice a year or two ago when he was banging goals in for fun. He's missed a few, but also where does he play in that Arsenal lineup? Because you mentioned he's quite similar to Odegaard in the sense that, maybe one or two people sceptical when he first arrives, but does he slot straight in?
I think he can play in that attacking front three. He's pretty adaptable. He can play as a central striker as well. And I think when you look at the type of season that Arsenal are facing, where they're back in the Champions League, they'll be expected to compete quite deep into that, then you need a greater depth of quality throughout the squad. Jesus missing with injury, well, I mean, they were still in the title hunt just about when he came back, but it was a major blow to them. And while Nketiah did score some goals, I think they're probably now looking at their squad beyond their first 11, which is obviously very, very competitive, that first maybe, let's say, 12, 13 players, and thinking, OK, we're going to be playing 60-plus games possibly this season. There has to be a greater depth to the squad, and Havertz will start a lot of games. Whether he'll start when they're playing Champions League semi-finals, if they get that far, or cup finals, that's really for him to prove. That's it for all signings. I think he still has to establish himself in that first team.